Few issues in modern international relations have been quite as divisive as Kosovo. Its decision to declare independence from Serbia in 2008 split world opinion and continues to affect discussions on other conflicts, including Ukraine. As many pointed out, Kosovo's declaration of independence violated the long-held principle that parts of states couldn't unilaterally secede, claims rejected by Kosovo's supporters, who argue that it is in fact a special case. So, just how exactly should we really understand Kosovo? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. Sometimes an issue arises that exposes deep problems and contradictions in how we think about international relations. One of the best examples over the past quarter century has been the question of Kosovo's 2008 Declaration of Independence. Even today, the international community remains deeply divided over the issue. While half of all UN members have recognised Kosovo as a sovereign independent state, the other half still regards it as Serbian territory, albeit formally under UN administration. But the effects are far wider reaching. Many separatist groups point to the Kosovo example as a justification for their right to break away from a country. Likewise, Russia has used the case to justify its acts in eastern Ukraine, arguing that if Western states could declare that Kosovo had a right to secede from Serbia, then it could make the same case for Crimea and the Donbass. And yet, at the same time, Kosovo also highlights many of the most severe problems regarding the ways that we think about secession and self-determination. As I discussed in a recent video, while we use the term self-determination as a general concept, it has in fact come to mean two very different things in modern international relations. On the one hand, in colonial contexts defined as overseas territories, it grants a right to independence. However, in the case of existing states, the concept means a right to meaningful self-rule. It doesn't grant a right to unilaterally break away. And yet, Kosovo has been presented as an exception to this rule. So, just how exactly should we think about the Kosovo case? Like many other issues, Kosovo is wrapped up in a complex history. While there's long been an ethnic Albanian presence in the region, it became part of the medieval Serbian kingdom before being conquered by the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century. This lasted until the start of the 20th century, when the Balkan Wars forced the Ottomans from most of their remaining European holdings. While this led to the creation of an independent Kingdom of Albania, Kosovo was instead conquered by the Kingdom of Serbia. As a result, when Serbia united with other South Slavic states following the end of the First World War, Kosovo became part of the new Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Although there's a fierce debate about the exact ethnic composition of Kosovo, it's generally accepted that most of its population at this stage were ethnic Albanians. This would become especially significant following the Second World War, when the Yugoslav monarchy was overthrown and the country's new leader, Josip Broz Tito, reconstituted Yugoslavia as a communist federation. Crucially though, Tito distinguished two distinct groups within the country. First, there were the nations, the six peoples seen as native to Yugoslavia: the Bosnians, the Croats, the Montenegrins, the Serbs and the Slovenes. Each was given its own federal republic. Then there were the nationalities. These either had an external national state, such as the Hungarians, Italians, Slovaks and Bulgarians, or were transnational communities, such as the Jews, the Roma and the Ruthenians. As the Albanians fell into this second category, Kosovo was never made a separate federal republic. Instead, it became an autonomous province of Serbia. But despite this, it steadily gained more powers, eventually gaining an individual seat on the Federal Executive Council, alongside the six republics and Vojvodina, another autonomous Serbian province. However, and crucially, under the 1974 constitution, Kosovo and the Kosovo Albanians didn't receive the nominal right to break away from Yugoslavia like the nations and the republics. On the 4th of May 1980, Tito died. Without its strongman, Yugoslavia gradually began to weaken, and by the end of the decade, the cracks were showing, not least of all in Kosovo, where ethnic Serbs argued that they were now facing growing discrimination by the ethnic Albanian majority. In March 1989, the Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic abolished Kosovo's autonomy. Faced with this, opposition to Serbian rule increased, and in 1991 the Kosovo Albanians organised an unofficial referendum showing an overwhelming support for independence. Meanwhile, by this stage, Yugoslavia as a whole had begun to collapse. As Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Macedonia all broke away, sparking a series of bitter wars, questions also arose over Kosovo's status. While the Kosovo Albanians argued that they should also have a right to independence, a commission set up by the European Union to investigate the legal questions arising from Yugoslavia's collapse concluded that as Kosovo was not a formal republic, it didn't have the right to secede and gain independence. Instead, it would have to remain a part of Serbia. All this would come to the fore in 1995 when the war in Bosnia finally ended. With their calls for independence ignored, the Kosovo Albanians now launched an armed insurgency against Serbian rule. While this gathered little international attention at first, by late 1998 the fighting was increasingly intense and civilian casualties were growing. As a result, in early 1999 a peace conference was convened to discuss Kosovo's future. However, this failed to reach an agreement. And as the West blamed Milosevic for the impasse, NATO began bombing Serbia. And in June 1999, after 78 days, Serbia agreed to withdraw its forces from Kosovo. But while the UN Security Council placed Kosovo under UN administration pending a final settlement, under the terms of Resolution 1244, Kosovo officially remained under Serbian sovereignty. Once again, this would be crucial. In the following years, tensions continued in Kosovo as pressure for independence remained strong amongst the ethnic Albanian majority. This erupted into major interethnic rioting in 2004. Faced with this, and despite hopes that the future of Kosovo could have been delayed indefinitely, the Security Council agreed to start formal status talks in early 2006, led by Martti Ahtisaari, a former president of Finland. However, whilst Serbia was willing to offer Kosovo extensive autonomy, the Albanian population insisted on full sovereign statehood. As the deadlock threatened to lead to a new outbreak of violence, this time aimed at NATO and UN presence in Kosovo, the United States and leading EU members agreed that the only realistic outcome was now independence. However, realising that they threatened to create a dangerous precedent in international affairs, they argued that Kosovo's independence was in fact a unique case in international relations. Its claim to statehood was based on three specific features. First, the systematic human rights violations that had been committed by Serbia. Secondly, its status within Yugoslavia. And thirdly, its period of self-rule under UN authority. As a result, following the failure of UN-led talks and a subsequent process overseen by the United States, Russia and the European Union, Kosovo declared independence in February 2008. But while the United States, Britain, France and most of the European Union immediately recognised Kosovo, Russia, China and much of Africa and Asia refused to recognise it, arguing that Serbia must agree to its independence. Even now, 15 years later, Kosovo remains recognised by only half the world, and continued Russian and Chinese opposition means that it has no chance of joining the United Nations. More to the point, Kosovo remains a deep source of contention with profound implications. Many observers regard Kosovo as a prime example where the long-standing principle of the territorial integrity of states has been violated. I hope you're finding this valuable. If so, please consider giving it a like and perhaps subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It all really helps. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. So, what exactly does all this mean? As uncomfortable as it may be for many to hear, From a strictly legal point of view, Kosovo's independence was in fact contrary to established international relations principles regarding self-determination and the territorial integrity of states. The general understanding is that the right of self-determination leading to independence only applies to colonial territories or areas under military occupation. It doesn't apply to territories or peoples within existing states. As Kosovo was part of Serbia, so there wasn't a generally recognised right for it to gain sovereign statehood. Of course, many will point to a subsequent International Court of Justice advisory opinion stating that Kosovo's declaration of independence didn't violate international law. This is of course true, but the court made it clear that it was referring only to the declaration, not to the effects of that statement. The judges emphasise that they took no position on whether or not Kosovo was in fact a state. They merely said that there was no legal prohibition on the Kosovo authorities claiming to be a state, a vast difference between the 2 points. As for the unique case justification, this is at best meaningless and at worst dangerous. There are no such things as unique cases in international relations. Once a rule has been broken, even for the best of intentions, it becomes a precedent. In the case of Kosovo, the effects have been profound. Just months after much of the West recognised Kosovo, Vladimir Putin seized on the case to justify Russia's recognition of South Ossetia and Abkhazia from Georgia. Likewise, he used it as a pretext for Russia's decision to annex Crimea and eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow has also used Kosovo's unilateral declaration of independence as a powerful tool in its propaganda arsenal, arguing that the West bends international law to fit its needs while rejecting the right of others to do the same. In this sense, Kosovo's decision to press ahead with independence and the West's decision to support it violated one of the most fundamental principles of modern international relations, namely the territorial integrity of states. However, while Kosovo may be wrong regarding legal norms, in political terms, Serbia's position has been highly self-defeating. While Kosovo may not have had the automatic legal right to independence and should not have unilaterally seceded, Serbia should have accepted the will of Kosovo and allowed it to go its own way. In the context of Yugoslavia, it amounted to a republic in all but name, and without Tito's decision to decree that only the nations had a right to republics and therefore secession, Kosovo would in fact have been Yugoslavia's seventh republic. More to the point, any remaining Serbian claim over Kosovo was effectively made redundant in 2006 when Montenegro finally split from Serbia and became independent. If the Montenegrins, who share close ethnic, linguistic and religious affinities with the Serbs, didn't want to remain in a union with Serbia, it became wholly unrealistic to expect Kosovo to do so. As for the Serbian claim that extensive autonomy was a serious option, this seems unlikely. Having been given extensive self-rule under UN supervision, the price for Kosovo to fully accept continued Serbian sovereignty would have been far more than most ordinary Serbs would have been willing to take. As well as almost certainly requiring Kosovo to have nearly complete autonomy, it would have meant giving Kosovo substantial representation in the Serbian National Parliament and within the government, civil service, diplomatic service and the military. It would have also been extremely costly. Kosovo was always one of the most economically underdeveloped parts of Yugoslavia. This would have meant that Serbia would have had to pay vast amounts for little apparent return. Of course, while some Serbs would argue that maintaining control over an area with such important historical, cultural and a religious place in Serbian life would have been worth paying the price, all this would have been far more effectively managed and protected with an amicable agreement to let Kosovo go its own way. Indeed, this would have been far better than the current situation, where Pristina is steadily pressuring the Serbs in Kosovo to accept its rule. Meanwhile, Kosovo has become a deep source of antagonism between Serbia and the European Union. So, where does all this leave us now? Of course, there's little ground for compromise at the extremes of the debate. Many Serbs will continue to insist that Kosovo is Serbia and point to Western hypocrisy, completely ignoring the specific context of the situation. Meanwhile, many Kosovo Albanians and their Western supporters will cling to the idea that Kosovo is somehow a unique case and that it is in fact solved, thus refusing to engage with Serbia on the substantive questions of status and keeping it out of the UN indefinitely. For all these reasons, it's time for this to change on both sides. The Kosovo Albanians need to face up to the fact that their independence is built on a fundamental anomaly in international relations that can't be fixed until there's a compromise with Serbia. They were promised an outcome, complete independence and universal recognition, that simply couldn't be delivered. Instead, even today, Kosovo remains outside the UN. Equally, Serbs also need to face reality. As painful and humiliating as the loss of Kosovo may be, in the broader context of the breakup of Yugoslavia, it's utterly unrealistic to expect, let alone demand, that Kosovo remains under Serbian sovereignty. Despite the wounded pride, finding a way to let Kosovo go would be far, far better for Serbia. Meanwhile, it's also time for the West to recognise its mistakes and turn its attention to resolving the issue fairly and equitably. Having imposed a settlement that went against international principles, they've spent 15 years trying to fix the problem by pressuring Serbia to take something that no other country has been forced to accept in modern times. All this has had disastrous consequences. Apart from the deep resentment that this has fed in Serbia, it's provided Moscow with an ideal opportunity to turn this to its advantage, not just using it as a precedent for its own efforts to seize territory in other countries, but also to highlight Western hypocrisy more generally. The big question at this stage is whether the situation can be salvaged. On the one hand, there are ideas for a settlement that would finally allow Serbia to accept Kosovo's independence. These range from considerable autonomy even through to redrawing the border to allow Serbian areas to remain within Serbia. More to the point, a fair and equitable settlement agreed on by both sides would restore balance to the international order. Once a deal is reached, the matter is closed. It sets no precedent for any other territory. It'll become a mutually agreed separation, specific to the circumstances. Even now, Serbia and Kosovo can yet find a solution that respects international principles and accepts the realities on the ground, and in doing so, ends one of the most problematic issues of modern international relations. And yet, for all this, there remains another serious problem. Would Russia allow any deal reached between Kosovo and Serbia to pass through the UN Security Council without securing a similar arrangement for the territories it seized in Ukraine? In this sense, the effects of the Kosovo case may well yet be felt for a long time to come. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.